and I was examining a Civil War exhibit at the Spokane Museum when a woman pressed a folded note into my palm. Act normal. Smile. Leave when I do. Her whisper was urgent. That man by the sculptures has been watching you for the past 20 minutes. When I turned to look, my heart stopped. I couldn't believe who was standing there. Before I reveal who was watching me at that museum, tell me in the comments, where are you watching this story from? The afternoon light filtered through the Spokane Art Museum's tall windows as I stood alone before a Civil War exhibit studying a faded photograph of Gettysburg. At 65, these quiet Thursday afternoons had become my sanctuary, a peaceful break from volunteer tutoring and a chance to indulge in the history that fascinated me throughout my 42 years teaching high school. I was examining a Confederate soldier's diary when I felt paper being pressed into my palm. The woman beside me appeared to be in her 50s, navy blazer, sensible shoes, the kind who blended into museum crowds perfectly. Act normal, she whispered, eyes fixed on the display. That man by the Revolutionary War section has been watching you for 20 minutes. 4 decades in high school classrooms had taught me to spot trouble from across a hallway. This felt different, darker, more personal. Who are you? I murmured, adjusting my reading glasses. Penelope Hayes, private investigator. We need to talk, but not here. Her voice carried authority I recognized from years of school board meetings. In 3 minutes, follow my lead to the exit. Don't look at him yet. I unfolded the paper carefully. Written in neat handwriting. Your son Garrick is not who you think he is. Trust me. My blood turned cold. Garrick, my successful real estate consultant son, who lived in that beautiful colonial across town with Christine and their twin girls. The son too busy to visit lately, always traveling for business. Penelope moved toward a Union Army uniform display. I forced myself to wait, using patience developed during countless parent-teacher conferences when careful words mattered more than quick reactions. Finally, I turned slowly, naturally. That's when I saw him. Garrick stood near the Revolutionary War section, pretending to study Valley Forge artifacts. But his eyes weren't on history, they were on me. Even from 50 feet away, I could see the calculating expression I'd never noticed before. The way he held himself like someone conducting surveillance, rather than a son enjoying an afternoon museum visit. Our eyes met briefly. Instead of the warm smile I expected, instead of walking over to say hello, Garrick looked away quickly and moved deeper into the exhibit. My hands trembled. In 42 years of teaching, I'd learned to read people, to distinguish between innocent behavior and something troubling. What I saw in my son's body language wasn't casual surprise at running into his father unexpectedly. It was the careful positioning of someone who didn't want to be detected. Penelope caught my eye and nodded toward the exit. I followed at the measured pace of a retired teacher with all the time in the world, even though my heart hammered against my ribs. The museum's marble floors echoed with our footsteps as we walked past Renaissance paintings and Greek pottery. My reflection in the glass cases looked pale, older than my years. Behind us, I sensed, rather than saw, Garrick maintaining his distance, following at the edge of my peripheral vision. Outside, October air bit at my cheeks as Penelope handed me a business card. Miller's Coffee House on Riverside, 1 hour, she said quietly. Come alone. What I have to tell you about your son will change everything you thought you knew about your family. She disappeared into the afternoon crowd before I could respond, leaving me standing on the museum steps, with her card in one hand and a dozen questions burning in my mind. As I walked to my car, I couldn't shake the image of Garrick's face. Not the loving son who used to help me grade papers at the kitchen table, but a stranger wearing my child's features, watching me with the cold assessment of someone who saw me not as family, but as a target. The drive home took 15 minutes, but felt like hours. How long had my own son been watching me, and what could he possibly be looking for? Miller's Coffee House sat tucked between a bookstore and dry cleaner on Riverside Avenue, the kind of neighborhood spot where conversations stayed private. I arrived early, choosing a corner booth with clear sightlines and old teacher's habit. Penelope Hayes entered precisely on time, sliding the manila folder across the scarred wooden table. What I'm about to tell you won't be easy to hear, Mr. Thompson. I gripped my coffee mug. You said Garrick isn't who I think he is. 6 months ago, Timothy Reed hired me, 73-year-old widower from Coeur d'Alene, who thought he was investing his retirement savings with a legitimate real estate consultant. She opened the folder, revealing photographs. Instead, he lost everything. The photo showed a frail man with kind eyes standing before a modest ranch home with a foreclosed sign planted like a tombstone in the yard. Timothy hired me to investigate Thompson Property Solutions, LLC, your son's company. My stomach dropped. I'd been proud of Garrick's success, his expensive suits, that colonial he'd bought for Christine and the girls. Now those achievements felt sinister. There's some mistake, I said, remembering Garrick's sudden wealth, his distance from family gatherings, vague explanations about complex deals. Penelope slid more documents forward. Your son operates a reverse mortgage scam. He targets elderly homeowners, widows, widowers, isolated people. POSES, as a financial consultant, gains their trust, convinces them to take fraudulent loans against their homes. The paperwork is forged. Money disappears into shell companies. Garrick tells victims they're making safe investments while stealing their homes. The coffee shop's warmth felt suffocating. Around us, customers discussed weekend plans while my world crumbled with each document. How many? I whispered. 18 confirmed victims over 3 years. Total losses of $2.8 million. Your son's personal take approximately $1.2 million. 18 families, 18 people who trusted someone reminding them of their own sons believing his promises of security. People like Timothy Reed, whose photograph held too much sorrow for one lifetime. The evidence was overwhelming: bank statements, loan documents, property transfers painting my eldest son not as the businessman I'd believed, but as a predator feeding on elderly trust. Penelope leaned forward, expression softening. Mr. Thompson, there's something else. She pulled out a final document, a property assessment for my home on Maple Street, where I'd raised 3 children, where Sarah had planted roses, still blooming each spring. Your son didn't just target strangers, she said quietly. You're his next victim. The words hit like a physical blow. My own son, the boy I'd taught to ride a bicycle, helped with homework at our kitchen table, celebrated when he graduated college with honors. That same person had spent 3 years systematically destroying the lives of people exactly like me. I don't understand, I managed. Why would he? Money? Power? Maybe he sees elderly people as easy marks? Penelope's voice hardened. Or maybe he's just discovered he's good at it. I stared at the assessment of my home. $650,000, it said. Enough to fund whatever scheme Garrick was planning next. The house where Sarah and I had built our life together, where we'd raised our children with values of honesty and compassion, was nothing more than another target to my own flesh and blood. What happens now? I asked. Penelope gathered the documents. Now you decide whether you're going to let him destroy you, like he destroyed Timothy Reed and 17 others, or whether you're going to fight back. She stood, leaving me alone with the weight of her revelation. Mr. Thompson, she said, pausing at the door, there's something else you need to know. Your son didn't just target strangers, you're his next victim. The drive home passed in a blur of autumn leaves and racing thoughts. My hands trembled, unlocking the front door of the house Sarah and I had shared for 37 years now, apparently just another target in my son's criminal enterprise. I headed straight for my study, searching through mail I'd been ignoring. Buried beneath utility bills was an envelope with no return address containing a document that made my blood freeze, a property transfer agreement dated 3 weeks in the future, bearing what appeared to be my signature authorizing sale of my home to Riverside Holdings, LLC. 42 years of teaching had trained me to spot forgeries, students, faking parents' signatures, altered report cards. This was sophisticated but flawed. The D in Draxon was too angular, the P in Thompson slightly too wide. Someone had studied my signature carefully, but not carefully enough. I called Penelope immediately. Hayes Investigations. It's Draxon Thompson. I found something. I described the forged document, the mysterious LLC, the sale date just 2 weeks away. Penelope listened in heavy silence. Riverside Holdings, she said finally. Give me 10 minutes. While waiting, I searched my files for other suspicious correspondence. There a letter from Lawrence Peaton, attorney at law, dated 6 weeks ago, discussing estate planning opportunities and suggesting we meet about protecting assets for your family's future. I'd dismissed it as junk mail. Now I understood it was reconnaissance. The phone rang. Riverside Holdings is registered to Lawrence Peaton, Penelope said without preamble. Same attorney filing incorporation papers for your son's shell companies. Mr. Thompson Garrick has been planning this for months. I sank into my desk chair, crushed by realization. My own son had been circling like a vulture, waiting to steal everything Sarah and I had built. The house where we'd celebrated holidays, where I'd helped children with homework, where Sarah had died peacefully. It was all just another elderly mark to exploit. What's my next move? Don't sign anything. Don't meet with attorneys. And be very careful who you trust. If Garrick forges legal documents, there's no telling how far he'll go. After hanging up, I sat in gathering darkness, surrounded by photo albums, teaching commendations, thank you cards from former students, all now feeling like evidence against my own flesh and blood. The grandfather clock chimed 11 when the phone rang again. Unknown number. Hello? The voice was electronically distorted, mechanical, and cold. You should have minded your own business, old man. My grip tightened on the receiver. Who is this? Someone who's been cleaning up messes for a long time. Heart attacks are so common at your age, especially for people who ask too many questions. So tragic. So final. Are you threatening me? A mechanical laugh. I'm educating you. Your son has built something valuable, something that benefits a lot of important people. We won't let one stubborn old teacher destroy years of careful work. Garrick is stealing from innocent. Garrick is conducting business. You have 48 hours to forget everything you think you've learned. Forget the private investigator. Forget the documents. Sign whatever papers he brings you and live quietly in whatever retirement facility he chooses. And if I refuse, then you'll join your wife sooner than expected. The line went dead, leaving me alone in darkness with the terrible understanding that this had escalated far beyond money. They were prepared to kill me to protect Garrick's operation. The mechanical laughter still echoed as I sat in darkness, the stranger's words replaying, "Then you'll join your wife sooner than expected." Sarah. My beloved Sarah, who died 5 years ago on a quiet Tuesday morning while I taught American history. I'd found her collapsed in our kitchen, still wearing her yellow apron. The paramedics said massive heart attack, sudden merciful. At 62, she'd had no heart problems, but doctors said these things just happened. Now those words took on sinister new meaning. I walked to the mantelpiece where Sarah's photograph smiled down the same radiant smile from our wedding day. Had she known something? In those final months, she'd seemed troubled, asking strange questions about Garrick's sudden prosperity. "Something doesn't add up, Drax," she'd said, using my nickname. "When did our boy become so secretive about work?" I'd dismissed her concerns as motherly worry, but Sarah had been perceptive 30 years as a school counselor, taught her to spot trouble before it fully emerged. The phone rang again, same unknown number. Having second thoughts. "Old man, what did you do to my wife?" Mechanical laughter. "Smart question. Too bad you're asking 5 years too late." My hands clenched. She knew, didn't she? She figured out what Garrick was doing. Sarah got curious about things that weren't her business. Started asking wrong people wrong questions. We couldn't have that loose end. The room spun. My sweet Sarah murdered for being too good to ignore her son's crimes. The woman who'd spent her career helping troubled kids killed to protect a scheme preying on people like us. "You bastards," I whispered. "Careful, Thompson. Anger makes people careless. Careless people have accidents. Is that your plan for me? Another convenient accident? Only if you force our hand. 46 hours now. Think about what Sarah would want. Would she want you throwing your life away over something unchangeable?" But they were wrong about Sarah's wishes. She'd fought for people who couldn't fight themselves, stood up to bullies, protected the vulnerable. She wouldn't want me surrendering to her murderers. "You made a mistake," I said quietly. "What's that?" "You told me the truth about Sarah. Now this isn't about my house or money. It's about justice for my wife." I hung up immediately, dialing Penelope. "Hayes Investigations. It's late, Mr. Thompson." "They killed Sarah. My wife didn't die naturally. They murdered her because she was exposing Garrick's operation." "Silence, then. Are you certain?" The voice practically confessed. "Penelope, I need help, not just to save my house, but get justice for Sarah and those other victims. What are you thinking?" I looked at Sarah's photograph, drawing strength from her memory. Garrick expects a confused, frightened old man. Instead, he'll get an angry teacher with 42 years' experience dealing with bullies. These people are dangerous. So am I. They just don't know it yet. The grandfather clock chimed midnight. 47 hours until Garrick's guardianship hearing. Time to transform from prey to predator. I spent the remaining dark hours planning, fueled by grief that had crystallized into cold determination. Sarah deserved justice. Timothy Reed and 17 other victims deserved justice. And if these criminals thought one retired teacher would roll over quietly, they were about to learn the most important lesson of their lives. By dawn, I knew exactly what I had to do. The abandoned warehouse on Spokane's outskirts looked like dozens I'd passed over the years. Rusted siding, broken windows, weeds through cracked asphalt. Tonight it served as the perfect meeting place for a conversation that could send my son to prison. Timothy Reed waited inside a frail 73-year-old whose kind eyes couldn't hide deep-etched fear. 42 years of teaching had trained me to read people. Quickly, Timothy was terrified, but determined courage, born from having nothing left to lose. "Mr. Thompson, thank you for coming. Call me Draxon. We're both victims here." He managed a weak smile. "Penelope said you might help bring your son to justice. I know how difficult this must be." I studied Timothy's weathered features, seeing echoes of my students' grandparents, decent people who'd worked hard only to be betrayed by someone they'd trusted. "What do you have?" Timothy opened a battered briefcase revealing folders stuffed with documents. "Everything from my dealings with Garrick. Loan applications with forged signatures, bank transfers, even recorded phone conversations." He handed me a digital recorder. I started taping calls when things felt wrong. Garrick's voice filled the warehouse, smooth and persuasive. "Mr. Reed, this investment opportunity is perfect for your situation. Returns will supplement Social Security beautifully, and your house serves as collateral, so there's no risk to liquid assets." My stomach turned, hearing my son's practice lies, weaponized trust, exploiting Timothy's financial fears. "There's more." Timothy produced bank statements. After I signed, money disappeared from accounts I didn't know existed. When I questioned him, Garrick said it was normal processing, and I shouldn't worry my old head about complex matters. The condescension made my hands clench. This was how Garrick saw people like Timothy, like me. Disposable elderly marks, too confused to understand they were being robbed. "Mr. Thompson!" The voice came from the entrance. A woman in her 40s approached, badge visible. "Agent Williams, FBI Financial Crimes Division." Timothy stepped back nervously, but I held ground. "How long have you been listening?" "Long enough. Mr. Reed contacted us 6 months ago, but we needed more evidence." She looked at documents spread between us. "What we really needed was someone inside. Someone like me. Your son's been careful. Shell companies, forged documents, intimidation. But family meetings are different. People get comfortable, say things they wouldn't tell strangers." I understood. "You want me to wear a wire?" Tomorrow's intervention about your supposed declining health could provide exactly what we need. Garrick explaining plans in his own words on tape with witnesses. Timothy leaned forward eagerly. "This could help all of us, me, other victims, even you." Agent Williams produced a recording device no bigger than a shirt button. Technology is simple, undetectable. Just let Garrick talk. I thought about Sarah Timothy's foreclosed home, 17 other destroyed families. The choice was clear. What do I need to know? Act confused, vulnerable, exactly what Garrick expects. Ask questions, making him explain plans. More details he provides, stronger our case becomes. Examining the tiny device, I felt familiar satisfaction of a lesson plan coming together. Tomorrow, Garrick would walk into what he thought was a family intervention about his confused father. Instead, he'd find himself in the most important classroom of his life, with a teacher who'd finally learned the truth about his star pupil. Tomorrow's family intervention about my declining health would become Garrick's confession booth. Saturday afternoon, sunlight filled my living room as my children gathered around the coffee table where Sarah used to serve dinner. The wire recording device felt weightless against my chest, but carried the burden of justice for 18 victims. Garrick sat in my recliner with practiced authority, expensive suit and confident smile masking the predator I now knew him to be. Christine perched beside him, perfectly complicit. Evelyn had flown from Seattle, her lawyer instincts, sensing something wrong, while Kevin fidgeted nervously, still believing the best of everyone. "Dad, we're here because we love you," Garrick began with false concern. "We've noticed troubling changes, confusion, memory lapses, poor judgment." I slumped my shoulders, playing the confused father they expected. "I don't understand." "The bills, Dad? You've been forgetting payments, making strange calls to lawyers." Garrick leaned forward with manufactured sympathy. "Yesterday you told Evelyn wild stories about fraud schemes." "That's not like you." "It's textbook dementia," Christine added smoothly. "Paranoid delusions, accusations against family." I remembered teaching 8-year-old Garrick about honesty after he'd lied about breaking Sarah's vase. "Truth always comes out, son. Lies tangle themselves up." Now I watched those words prove prophetic. What are you proposing? I asked with feigned confusion. Guardianship, Garrick said gently. You'd still live here, keep independence. But Christine and I would manage finances, protect you from impulsive decisions. Like what decisions? That property assessment you mentioned to Kevin. You seem to think someone was stealing the house, which is impossible since you'd have to sign transfer documents yourself. My pulse quickened. Only someone forging documents would know I'd mentioned an assessment. How did you know about that, Garrick? Uncertainty flickered across his face. You told us. No, I didn't. I only mentioned it to Kevin, never said anything about transfer documents. My voice sharpened with teacher's authority. So how do you know about documents I'd have to sign? Silence. Evelyn studied her brother with new suspicion. Kevin sensed undercurrents he'd missed. Dad, you're confused again, Garrick said, confidence cracking. Am I then explain how you know about Riverside Holdings, LLC? Christine went pale. Garrick's mask slipped, revealing cold calculation. You've been talking to people you shouldn't, old man. There's the real Garrick, I said quietly. Not my loving son, but someone angry his victim won't cooperate. What's going on? Evelyn demanded. Garrick's control shattered. What's going on is our father's lost his mind and will destroy everything I've built. Do you know how many people depend on my business? 18 families you've destroyed with fraud, I said. You don't understand real estate complexity. I understand theft, Garrick. Forgery. Planning to steal my house like you stole Timothy Reed's. Is this true? Kevin gasped. Shut up, Kevin. Garrick's snarled facade completely gone. You're all too stupid to understand what I've accomplished. Dad should be grateful in a care facility. He won't embarrass the family anymore. Evelyn recoiled at his cruelty. Listen to yourself. I'm listening to reality. He's a confused old teacher who's outlived usefulness. Once we get guardianship, we can liquidate his assets, and he stopped realizing he'd confessed to elder abuse in front of witnesses, all captured by FBI recording. That's when I heard footsteps on the front porch. The FBI had arrived. The front door burst open as Agent Williams and 3 other federal agents swept into my living room, badges. Visible weapons drawn but lowered. The quiet Saturday afternoon family gathering transformed instantly into a law enforcement operation. Garrick Thompson, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, elder abuse, and money laundering. Agent Williams announced, her voice cutting through the shocked silence. Garrick bolted from the recliner, making a desperate dash toward the back door, but 2 agents were already positioned there. He stumbled to a halt in my kitchen, the same kitchen where Sarah used to pack his school lunches, where I'd helped him with homework at the scarred wooden table. This is insane, he shouted, spinning to face us. Dad, tell them you're confused, that you made this up. But the man pleading with me wasn't the successful businessman who'd walked into my house an hour ago. This was a cornered criminal mask completely stripped away, revealing the predator who'd built his fortune on the backs of vulnerable elderly victims. Christine Thompson, you're also under arrest as an accessory. Agent Williams continued producing handcuffs. Christine tried to run for the front door, but Agent Williams caught her easily. I didn't know anything about this, she screamed as the cuffs clicked shut. Garrick said it was all legitimate business. Ma'am, we have recordings of you discussing forged documents and victim selection criteria, Agent Williams replied calmly. You can save your explanations for your attorney. Evelyn pressed herself against the wall, her lawyer's composure shattered. Kevin sat frozen on the couch, tears streaming down his face as he watched his older brother being handcuffed in our childhood home. Mr. Thompson, Agent Williams turned to me. The recording device worked perfectly. We have everything we need. What about the others, Howard Sterling? Arrested simultaneously at his office downtown. We've been coordinating this operation for weeks, waiting for your son to provide the final pieces we needed. She consulted her notes. 18 victims will be eligible for restitution from seized assets. Timothy Reed's house has already been returned to him. The weight of those words settled over me. Justice for Timothy, for Sarah, for all the families Garrick had destroyed. Garrick looked at me from across the room, handcuffs glinting in the afternoon sunlight, streaming through Sarah's lace curtains. For a moment I saw the 8-year-old boy who'd cried when he broke that vase, who'd promised never to lie again. Dad, he whispered, his voice breaking, I'm sorry. I never meant for it to go this far. It started small, just a few deals, but then Sterling got involved and the money was so good and... Stop, I said quietly. Just stop. Please, Dad, you have to understand. I understand perfectly, Garrick. You saw elderly people as easy marks. You saw your own father as just another victim to exploit. My voice remained steady despite the breaking of my heart. You became everything I taught you not to be. Agent Williams stepped between us. We need to go, Mr. Thompson. Your son will be processed downtown. As they led Garrick toward the door, he looked back one final time. Dad, I love you. I know you don't believe me, but I do. I wanted to respond, wanted to say something that might bridge the chasm between the son I'd raised and the criminal he'd become. But the words wouldn't come. Love and betrayal tangled together in my throat, leaving only silence. The agents escorted both Garrick and Christine to waiting cars while neighbors gathered on their porches, drawn by the unusual activity. News vans were already pulling up. This story would be front-page material by tomorrow. As the last federal car disappeared down Maple Street, I stood in my doorway with Evelyn and Kevin beside me, the three of us united in grief and shock. When they led my son away in handcuffs, I realized the hardest part of this journey was just beginning. 6 weeks later, I sat in Spokane County Courthouse, watching my eldest son stand before Judge Martinez in an orange jumpsuit, hands shackled. His expensive suits replaced by the hollow look of a man who'd lost everything. Your Honor, Garrick said, voice barely a whisper, I plead guilty to all charges. I apologize to the victims. I've hurt my family. I've betrayed. And the community I've violated. The courtroom packed with faces I'd come to know. Timothy Reed, in front other elderly victims reporters, documenting Spokane's most notorious elder fraud ring. Agent Williams sat behind prosecution, her case complete. Judge Martinez sentenced Garrick to 12 years federal prison. As bailiffs led him away, he looked back one final time. I saw genuine remorse, but also understanding that some betrayals cut too deep for simple forgiveness. Driving home, I passed Riverside Art Museum, where this nightmare began. In late autumn, trees were bare, but something felt cleaner about the landscape, as if truth had swept away more than leaves. Kevin waited on my porch, 2 suitcases beside him. I've taken teaching leave, he said simply. If you'll have me, I'd like to stay, help you through this. My youngest son, 38, but still carrying the gentle heart I'd nurtured, had always been family peacemaker. Now, stepping up to fill the void Garrick's crimes created. I'd like that very much, I said, embracing him. That evening, Evelyn called from Seattle. Dad, I owe you enormous apology. I should have listened when you tried telling me what was happening. You believe the best of your brother, I told her. That's not a flaw, sweetheart. That's what good people do. I'm flying out next weekend. We need to rebuild what Garrick's lies tore apart. Over following weeks, my house filled with unexpected visitors. Timothy Reed came with apple pie tears, thanking me for returning his home. Margaret, 80-year-old widow from Coeur d'Alene, brought photographs of grandchildren she could afford visiting again thanks to restitution. You saved my future, she said, squeezing my hand. I don't know how to repay that. Live it well, I told her. That's payment enough. Each visit reminded me why I'd fought so hard. These weren't just victims. They were people whose trust had been weaponized by someone who should have protected the vulnerable. Kevin and I established new routines. Morning coffee on the porch, evening neighborhood walks, where I'd raised my children. He helped sort through Sarah's belongings, something I'd avoided for 2 years. We found her journal from months before she died, filled with growing suspicions about Garrick's business. She knew, Kevin said quietly, reading her careful observations about unexplained wealth and secretive calls. Mom figured it out before any of us. She was always the smartest one in the family, I replied, touching her photograph. As winter approached, I felt something I hadn't experienced since Sarah's death. Peace. Not happiness exactly, but quiet satisfaction, knowing I'd honored her memory by fighting for justice. The house still echoed with loss, but also held promise of healing. The grandfather clock chimed midnight as I sat in my study surrounded by thank you cards from victims who'd gotten their lives back. 18 families sleeping safely in their own homes tonight because one retired teacher had refused to become another statistic. 3 months later, I learned the most important lesson of my 42-year teaching career. Spring had returned to Spokane when I walked into Jefferson High School's classroom 204, the same school where I'd taught for 4 decades. This time as a volunteer teaching financial literacy to seniors about protecting themselves and their families from fraud. Today we're discussing elder fraud. I told 23 students how criminals target older Americans and how you can protect your loved ones. A girl raised her hand. Mr. Thompson, how do you know so much about this? I paused, looking at faces that could have been my grandchildren, the future of our community. Because 3 months ago I discovered my own son was running one of Washington State's largest elder fraud operations. The classroom fell silent. These teenagers suddenly understood that families could harbor dark secrets, that love and betrayal often walk together. My son stole over $2 million from 18 families. He tried stealing my house. He even had my wife murdered when she got too close to the truth. What did you do? A boy asked. I fought back. With truth evidence and help from law enforcement, he's now serving 12 years in federal prison. After class, Kevin waited with 4-year-old Emma, my granddaughter, whose bright eyes reminded me daily why this work mattered. Grandpa Drax, she squealed, running into my arms. How was school, sweetheart? Good, Daddy says pizza and cartoons tonight. Simple pleasures, family time, things Garrick had sacrificed pursuing wealth, the things that actually mattered. That evening, as Kevin tucked Emma into his childhood room, I sat on the porch where Sarah and I used to dream about retirement. The house felt full again, not with expensive items Garrick valued, but with laughter, love, and promise of better tomorrows. My phone buzzed with Evelyn's text. Dad saw your news interview about fraud prevention. So proud. Love your daughter. Local news had featured my story as Triumph, a 70-year-old who'd refused victimhood, turning pain into purpose. The reporter asked what I wanted viewers to remember. Age isn't weakness, I'd said. Experience isn't confusion. When someone tries silencing you, that's when you need to speak loudest. I'd received hundreds of letters from seniors nationwide who'd recognized similar warning signs, found courage to ask difficult questions, protect themselves from predators who saw gray hair as opportunity rather than wisdom earned through decades. As I looked out at the street where I'd raised my children, where neighbors still waved and kids rode bicycles, I felt Sarah's presence in the evening breeze. The most important lesson of my 42-year career wasn't from textbooks. It was that truth has power transcending age, education, or circumstance. When we refuse silence, when we stand for what's right despite cost, we protect not just ourselves, but everyone who comes after us. Kevin emerged from the house, settling into Sarah's old rocking chair. Emma's asleep. She wants you to read her favorite story tomorrow. Which one? The one about the brave grandfather who saved everyone. I smiled, understanding she meant the bedtime story I'd created about our experience sanitized for a 4-year-old, but carrying the same message of courage, overcoming fear. 3 generations sitting on this porch. The grandfather who'd learned that fighting for truth was worth any cost. The son who'd chosen love over money. And the granddaughter who'd grow up knowing that sometimes the most important battles are fought by ordinary people who refuse to stay quiet. The evening star appeared above the maple tree Sarah had planted 30 years ago, and I knew she'd be proud of the man I'd become, the family we were rebuilding, the lives we'd helped save. What would you do if you discovered your own child was betraying everything you'd taught them? Looking back on this journey, I realize how close I came to losing everything. Not just my house, but my dignity, my family, and the truth about what happened to Sarah. If you're watching this and recognize warning signs in your own life, don't make my mistakes. Don't ignore your instincts when something feels wrong. Don't let family loyalty blind you to criminal behavior. And most importantly, don't stay silent when you discover the truth. This true story taught me that age isn't weakness. It's wisdom earned through decades of living. When someone tries to convince you that you're too old, too confused, or too trusting to understand what's happening, that's exactly when you need to fight hardest. These grandpa stories aren't just entertainment. They're warnings about predators who see gray hair as opportunity rather than experience. I've learned that evil often wears familiar faces, but God gives us strength to confront it when we choose truth over comfort. The hardest lesson of my 70 years wasn't taught in any classroom. It was discovering that sometimes the people we love most are the ones we need to protect ourselves from. My true story could have ended with me losing my home, my savings, and my sanity. Instead, it became a testament to the power of refusing to be silenced. Every day I received letters from seniors who found courage to ask difficult questions, to demand transparency to protect themselves from those who would exploit their trust. These grandpa stories matter because they remind us that ordinary people can do extraordinary things when they refuse to become victims. The best true story is one where truth triumphs over deception, where grandpa stories inspire others to stand up for what's right. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment about your own experiences and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories that prove age is just a number, but wisdom is forever.